So in this video, I'm going to have you consider that you actually might have an idol. Yes. Now you may be saying, Nailah, what are you talking about? An idol? I don't have any idols. If you are stuck in a relationship that you realize is toxic, has toxic traits, or something in you, your gut is telling you you should not be here. If you are in and out of toxic relationships, or maybe you're out of one, but you're still struggling to find peace in your life. You thought that by the time this relationship ended, I've been out of it for a while, I still don't have peace. I'm going to tell you that you might have an idol. So as you can see from the title, it is called Your Idols Will Fall. And again, you may be saying, Nailah, I don't have any idols, but stick with me. Stick with me. I thought I didn't either. But you might. Okay. About a month ago, was it a month? A few weeks ago, I did a fast with Prophetess Tiffany Montgomery, my first fast, spiritual fast, or any fast I've ever done. It was a spiritual fast. And the theme for that month she did was Your Idols Will Fall. Now, when we hear idols, we often think celebrities, right? That's very common in our culture where we are idolizing celebrities. Because they're always in the limelight, they have this big flashy life. But what she revealed to us is that anything and anyone can be an idol without us even realizing it. It may not even be that obvious. So first, let's look at what does an idol mean? What is the definition of that? Because again, a lot of times we think it's a celebrity or, someone big and famous, but it can be, an idol is anything that you honor more than your obedience to God. Okay, so it could be anything or anyone that you honor more, that's more important to you, that takes priority over your obedience to God. So one of the examples that Tiffany gave that hit me home, that hit right here, she said, your career can be an idol. I was like, ooh. Your desire to succeed can be an idol. I was like, ooh. Right? Because being ambitious is a good thing, but when you prioritize it over your obedience to God, that's when it becomes an idol. So you may say, well, how am I prioritizing it over God? If you're not following his word, if you're making it more important to do the things you need to do to excel in your career, but you're not making that same effort to read his word every day, to try to live according to his word, to follow the purpose that he has for you. These are all ways of prioritizing over your obedience to God. You are priority. So it's not that it's a bad thing. So that's the key. Sometimes an idol, is not necessarily bad, but because you were putting more into it than you are putting into God, that's when it becomes an idol. So that got me to thinking, well, how does that relate to my ladies who are looking to heal and overcome and break the cycle of toxic relationships? So today I'm going to share with you some things, people, places, or things that maybe you have made an idol that is keeping you stuck. And right before I share those few things with you that I want you to think about, the reason that it's so important not to make things an idol is because throughout the Bible, it makes it very clear that we should only keep God as priority. Again, it doesn't mean that other things are not important. Your family, your friends, your ambitions is all important, but nothing should take priority over your obedience to God. And that is where you run into trouble with God. That is where you run into trouble in our lives because we're not keeping him in first place. So as I said, this is the toxic relationship edition. Your idols will fall can apply to throughout any parts of your life. But in this topic, in this video of toxic relationships, the first idol that I want you to consider that you may have, and I see this so much, which is why I'm here, is studying narcissism and toxic relationships. Yes. So that can be an idol if you are studying it, you are watching endless videos about narcissism, about toxic relationships. And again, there's nothing wrong with educating yourself. But if you were doing that more than going into prayer and asking for guidance and asking for strength, right? Asking for clarity. If you're finding more time to obsess about that, that is where it has become an idol. And I want you to ask yourself, how long have I been researching this? How long have I been studying this? Right? That is a major issue I see. When I was going through my own experience, my own healing journey, the first time I came out of that toxic romantic relationship, I also had toxic family relationships. I took about a month to read up on narcissism. Now, I'm a mental health professional for those of you who are not yet familiar with me. I studied narcissism in school. I'm a mental health therapist by trade. I studied it, I know about it, but I didn't know the different faces of it, right? And especially when you are going through it on your own and in your own personal life, it can look different. So I took some time to study it. But what I wanted to make sure is that I was not in the same place 6 months from now, right? And it doesn't mean I'm healed, voila, magic had happened and everything's perfect again. No, that's not realistic. But I wanted to see progress. I did not want that to be my obsession, right? Because that person took enough out of my life. I didn't want to give them more of my life. And that can happen. You may not be with them, but your mind, you're still ruminating and still stuck there. Okay? So having the idol of studying narcissism and toxic relationships, that can be an idol that you might want to look into. Another idol that you may have created that you may not be aware of is the actual partner, the person that you were dating or married to. You have made them an idol because you have made it so important to fixate on, why do they treat me this way? Why are they like this? What are they doing now that we're not together? Are they going to move on? How could they do? You start to prioritize trying to figure them out rather than going to God for help. And again, there is nothing wrong with having questions. There's nothing wrong with looking for answers. There's nothing wrong with reaching out for support. God wants that. But again, we are not to prioritize and obsess over other things and not put that same energy into our obedience for God. Obedience for God, let me say this too, is not just about going to Him in prayer and going to Him for help, but obedience to God is also following the path that He wants for us. So we need to ask ourselves, would God want me to obsess over this person? Right? Because sometimes you're not going to get the answers. Sometimes you're just not going to get the answers. Sometimes you will, but sometimes you won't. So what does that mean? Does your healing have to delay because you didn't get some answers? You can heal without certain answers. You can heal without a closure or an apology. That is possible, right? If you don't make that your idol, if you don't make this person your idol, right? I know it's challenging, but it is possible. Taking people off the pedestal, taking certain things off of the pedestal, right? And putting that energy, putting that focus into, okay, what does God want for me? What would He want for me? The third idol that I want you to consider that you might have is your support system, your family and friends. Now, this one is personally for me. Let me give my experience so you can get an example of what I mean by making your support system your idol. Is that when I came out of my toxic romantic relationship, I went to family and friends for support. Now, this was probably the most traumatic experience, and I've been through some things in my life, but this coming out of this relationship was one of the most traumatic experiences I had ever had. And by the grace of God, I did have people that came to my aid. Some that I realized were actually wolves in sheep clothing, and most actually, were very genuine, good people that wanted to see me get through this phase of my life. But where I went wrong and how I made them an idol is I started to feel indebted to them. I think that's the word, right? I felt like I owed them so much, right? And there's a difference between having gratitude, right, for what someone has done for you and showing appreciation. There's a difference between that and feeling indebted to them. And that can become dangerous because when there are wolves in sheep clothing, right, that rush to help you, and that's where I started to discover the toxic people in my family Not all of them. Like I said, most of them were good, but there were a few that weren't. That's where I started to see they wanted me to feel indebted to them. So then they can control me. They felt like, ding, 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 this is finally the chance I get to control Nailah because she's always been independent and strong. And now this is the one time she's broken, and now I'm gonna rush in. I didn't show up when other times when I should have, but this time I'm gonna rush in because this is the time she's vulnerable, right? So that is where I made them my idol because I felt so appreciative that people stepped in and helped the way that they did, right? But again, the mistake I made was that I made an idol out of them because I made them more important than my obedience to God. I should have been checking in with God to say, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? Right? And not give them all the praise and glory. And let me say this. I believe God sometimes allows people to disappoint you, even when they're not wolves in sheep clothing. I believe God sometimes allows people to disappoint you so you can see that even though they're good people, even though they're good to you and good for you, that they're still human and humans can still disappoint. You should never give all the glory to man. You can show appreciation, you can show gratitude, and genuinely be, grateful, right? But don't give all the glory to them. Keep in mind that God is the source and the people, everything else are the resource, and He will dictate which resources you should use, right? But always make sure that the priority the priority is your obedience to God. The next idol that I see some people falling into is their career or their job. And I believe this is a coping mechanism, right? When you are going through a very hard time in your personal life, that you kind of throw yourself more into work because it's just, you're not dealing with emotions, right? You want something that you don't have to deal too much with your emotions. So I do understand that. But again, we want to be careful with that we don't make that career or that job your idol, that you look at that as your savior, that's going to save you. If I make more money, I won't need anybody again, or I'm going to build myself up. It's good to be ambitious, but do not make it your idol. And the fifth idol that I want you to be aware of, and this is one I can relate to personally as well, is idolizing marriage and family. Ooh, this is a dangerous one. Most of us women, at some point as a little girl, you always imagined that you would get married and build a family. And that is completely normal. It is healthy. And I believe it is what God wants for us. We are here to build families, to come together, to build partnerships, to live according to His will and not to have to do it alone, right? So there's nothing wrong with wanting that. However, where it becomes dangerous is when you make it your idol. When you make it your idol, you start to ignore red flags. You start to force things. You start to force relationships. You start to force partners to fit into this picture that you have created. Even though their behavior is showing you that they're not husband material. Even though their behavior is showing you that they're not really genuine. Even though their actions is showing you that they probably are living a double life and out there having a whole nother family or at least another girlfriend. Your gut is telling you that, right? But because you were so fixated on marriage and family and you have now created an idol that you are choosing to ignore all those signs because you want to force this and make this happen. That is a major mistake. And God can't bless that. God cannot bless that no matter how much you force it, no matter how much you pray, no matter how good of a person you are. He cannot bless that because that's not being obedient to Him. That's not what He wants for you. That's a hard one. I get it. I'm going to put the link in the description box below where I even go further into detail about that in my free ebook, my guide about mistakes I made in toxic relationships. But that was one of them. I idolized marriage and family because I came from a household with two parents that were married. And that is something I always wanted for myself. And one of the biggest mistakes I made was that it was so important to me that I chose to not ask God, hey, what should I do? Hey, I'm seeing this. Where do you think I should go with this? Not to rush things and force things. I wanted to be in control. I wanted to dictate how everything goes and ignore all the signs because I made marriage and family an idol. So as you can see, this list of idols that I stated, like I said, it's not that they're bad things. It's just about making it priority over your obedience to God. That's where you start to run into problems in your life. I know some of this might be new for you. It was new for me when I heard it, but it was so freeing. It was so mind blowing because sometimes we're causing damage in our lives without realizing it. And that's why it's so important to always be willing to develop yourself and educate yourself and see, okay, well, how does this apply to me? Because sometimes we think, oh, that's not for me. I don't have any idols. That's not for me. Right? But sometimes we have idols. We have things going on that we're not aware of, right? Because it has become the norm for us. So that's why it's so important to keep your mind open, keep educating yourself and keep looking and analyze your own, take inventory of your life to see, okay, like, where do I need to make some tweaks? Where do I need to make some changes, in order to live not just, a good life, yes, a good life as well, but an authentic life, right? Like a wholesome life, not just where things look pretty on the outside and it looks good to everyone else, but internally, things are also at peace and settled. Like I said, check in the description box below and get your free ebook, your free guide about the mistakes that I made in toxic relationships. I just shared one of them with you here tonight, but I go further into detail, and I believe that will help you to, again, reflect back to yourself and say, okay, am I making some of these mistakes? This book is for you whether you are still in a toxic relationship or you are out, but you're still struggling with healing and moving on. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this video. I hope that this was helpful for you. If it was, give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.